Welcome to the Newsome MMA betting podcast sponsored by CBD Life UK. I'm your host as always, Newsome, and tonight we're going to be breaking down UFC 225 in Chicago, Illinois. Now, I did say I was going to get another pro fighter to guest host on the podcast, and I even had a second pro fighter in the locker just in case the first fell through. The plan was genius until one may or may not have returned from Ibiza and the other is sat at TGI's right now. But they're both awesome guys doing some fun shit whilst not in camp, and rightly so. I'm not going to name the fighters as they'll both be on in the future, so there's no spoilers here. But the show must go on. And as always, I've got my bets listed for you guys. I'll be breaking those down in full for you. Anything that I haven't bet, I'll quick fire off at the end. I'll give you a pick, a method of victory, and the reason why I've not bet the fight as well. So the first full breakdown of the podcast, we've got Holm versus Megan Anderson. Now, it's not a fight that I was actually going to tape at all. I had no intention of taping it, and I was just going to sweep it under the carpet. But as I mentioned before, I'm in a really good Twitter group with some really sharp guys. And they were just like, no, so man, you've got to tape it. So I ran the tape, and to be honest with you, I was really surprised with what I saw. And this tends to be the case with a lot of fights that you end up betting that you weren't going to tape initially when someone's just giving you a push to go and tape a fight. And if anybody is listening to this right now and you haven't taped this fight and you might want to tape it in case you want to put a bet on, I still feel there's value on the line of the fighter that I backed, I would advise to watch the Megan Anderson tape first, the Holm tape after. I just think that order, that combination will just open up the fight in your eyes, just in such a way that I feel that you probably would be shocked as well. So the bet's Holm. I've got 3 units on Holm at -162. The line's roughly around the -225 mark. You can get it a little bit better, I think, still. But I still see value in that line. I just think it's a complete mismatch, and it's definitely Holm's fight to win here. Holm's coming off a loss to Chris Cyborg in her last fight. She did what no other woman has done in 10 years and take Cyborg to a decision. Really impressive. I bet Cyborg in that fight to win inside the distance. So obviously I lost on that bet. You know, I was quite impressed with how Holm fought. But the reason she took Cyborg to a decision is because Holm fights best on the back foot. She fights best backpedaling, counter-striking, while she's the one being pressured. Now, when she's fighting opponents that allow her to come forward, so let's take Bektic for example, you know, the quality in fight, the skill gap in quality of those fighters is astronomical. But Holm really looked a little lost coming forward and being the aggressor, and even to the point where neither fight was doing anything. I think it was Mark Goddard that was refereeing at the time. He had to stop the fight to tell him, you know, you've got to fight, do something. So yeah, it's really not her style. She does fight best moving backwards. Now, Megan Anderson's style's Muay Thai and she's quite aggressive. So I think this is definitely going to feed into Holm's style of fighting 100%. Now, at this point, you're then thinking, well, is it going to be another Cyborg situation where Cyborg was simply the better fighter? Is Megan Anderson simply going to be the better fighter? And I just don't believe so at all. Anderson's got a huge problem here. She's got so many holes in her striking game. I find it hard to see Holm getting styled on at all. Anderson's hittable. She walks her opponents down in straight lines. She's constantly flat-footed. Her head rarely moves off the centre line as well, which is a big worry because now you've got a movement issue and the fact that her head's just there, and like I say, she gets hit quite a lot, and she's really easy to counter because of this as well. It was just crazy watching the tape, and this is Holm's forte. So Anderson's aggressive, and there's all these holes in her game. And Holm is going to find these holes. She's a good counter-striker as it is. And we saw that against Cyborg. You know, she didn't light the world up. She didn't light Cyborg up. But what she did do was stay in there for 25 minutes. You know, other fighters just don't stay in the fight with Cyborg for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And she stayed in there for 5 rounds with Cyborg. And like I say, it's impressive when someone can do that. Now, Anderson does take a lot of damage. Like I said, she's hittable, but when she does take this damage, she tends to freeze up and just looks a little a little lost in the cage. Like, she's surprised that she's been hit and she doesn't really know how to react. And like I say, she just tends to go stiff, and it's crazy. I'm struggling to really explain it. You just need to go and watch some of Megan Anderson's fights. And just one thing to quickly mention as well, the level of competition she's been fighting is so low in women's MMA. The likes of Cindy Dandoir, I think Cindy Dandoir even beat her. The level of competition is definitely not UFC caliber. Whereas the level of competition Holm's been fighting is, yeah, she's got the wins over the likes of fighters like Betch, but it's there's a difference here in quality of fighter, in level of competition and experience. And honestly, I see Anderson coming out, being aggressive like she always does. She might have some success very early on, although, albeit that could be completely minimal success. I think Holm eventually figures her out. I think she takes a bit of time to figure her out, a little like the Ronda Rousey fight, when Rousey was constantly coming forward in waves, and Holm started off slower and then slowly started to pick it up, slowly started to find openings. Went that first round, and then the second round really started to capitalise on what she'd seen in that first round, and I see a pretty much exactly the same thing happening here. Um, Megan Anderson's combinations seem to be spammed, so she seems to have the same combinations pretty much each fight, and she just once it works once for in the fight inside the cage, she just throw it again and throw it again, and again that's going to be a nightmare for someone that does have decent fight IQ, that will be able to figure that out, especially moving on the back foot. It's going to almost be like Megan Anderson is feeling like she's going to be successful, and she is being successful in the fight, and then she's suddenly not going to be successful. That'll be when she freezes up. That'll be when she starts getting hit. That'll be when Holly Holm really starts putting it on her. I honestly think Holly Holm will find all the holes in Anderson's game, and yeah, I could even see Holm stopping her. I really could. Maybe a third round TKO once she's wore her down, and really put it on her. I think ultimately I'm going to go with the decision. I think that's probably the more likely outcome. But honestly, don't be surprised if Holly Holm stops Megan. So 3 units, Holly Holm at -162. Now the next bet and the next full breakdown of the card, we've got Alistair Overeem against Curtis Blaydes. Now, anybody that knows me and speaks to me often on Twitter and stuff like that, you absolutely know my thoughts on Curtis Blaydes. I think he's a future heavyweight champion. I think he's the future of the heavyweight division in the UFC and in MMA. I just think that the guy's got all the tools to really, really just be great in the sport. I can't really put it any other way. He's still young. I think he's only 26, 27 maybe. Um, what he's achieved in such a short time, and beating fighters like Mark Hunt in his last fight after getting nearly knocked out as well, coming back from that sort of adversity in the hardest hitting division in MMA. He's done a lot in such a short period of time, and he's only going to get better. He's got the wrestling base as well, which is huge, because we all know wrestling. Well, people have got different opinions. My opinion, I can't speak for everybody, but my opinion is wrestling's the most dominant discipline in mixed martial arts. I think if you're a good wrestler, the chances are you can win most fights, as long as your grappling's there as well, of course. But yeah, Curtis Blaydes for me is definitely a prospect, a future heavyweight champion. I've actually got an article on the Newsome MMA website about it as well. So if you go into the featured section, which is newsomemma.co.uk/featured, just scroll down a little bit, it'll be there if you fancy giving that a read. But as you can tell from the way I'm talking, the bet is Curtis Blaydes. 3 units again at -117. I think the line's up to like -170, -180 in some places. So it really did get a lot of steam, this line, and rightly so. I mean, honestly, I think -180 might be borderline and a bit into the area of being unplayable. But man, anything around minus, I think it opened in the UK at -110. I didn't see that line. Must not have lasted very long. So anything between -110 and like -150, -160, I definitely see value there. And I just think that Blaydes is on his path to becoming the UFC heavyweight champion. I think he has got one more loss in his locker. I think he will have definitely take that loss before he gets that strap. I just don't see it being in this fight against Overeem though. They do match up well in regards to physical size. So in a few of Blaydes' previous fights, he's had height advantages, big reach advantage as well. He's got long reach, but with Overeem, he does match up pretty well with him. And it's definitely a striker versus grappler scenario from the stylistic perspective. The problem that all heavyweights have with Blaydes, though, in this division, is that I've rarely seen wrestlers of Blaydes' caliber, not only in the UFC, but in MMA in general. Like, if you go down Alistair Overeem's record, and I'm not going to claim to know every single fighter on his record, especially in the early days, but apart from Brock Lesnar, which Overeem put out in round one anyway, he hasn't fought like a D1. Again, I don't know all the fighters, but from what I can see, he hasn't fought a D1 wrestler. He hasn't fought relentless wrestlers. The heavyweight division, for some reason, just seems to have never. In the UFC, I know we've had like your Randy Couture's and your DCs and stuff, but like both of those fighters were really comfortable standing up as well, even though they had this strong wrestling background. Whereas Blaydes seems to be relentless with his wrestling. I'm not saying his striking isn't good. His striking is definitely improving. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But Blaydes relies on his wrestling a lot, and it's something we don't see in the UFC and haven't seen in quite a while. And I just think that the heavyweights in this division are just gonna not come stuck against him, but just not be used to having that sort of style facing them. And that's exactly what Curtis Blaydes is. You know, they're just, like I said, in the wrestling department, they're just not used to it. And that's where Curtis Blaydes really flourishes in his takedowns and closing distance and getting his fighters to the mat. When they stand back up, he'll clinch them against the cage. He'll keep a hold of him and he'll just drag you straight back down. We saw that in the Mark Hunt fight. Hunt was repeatedly taken down, and that's not something you've ever seen from Hunt. He has been taken down before from previous fights. I think Miocic got him down a couple of times. I think Boy Nelson managed to get him down as well. So we have seen that from Hunt in getting taken down, but not in that manner. And this is what I mean. I think Curtis Blaydes is going to be doing this to all the heavyweights, and it's going to get to a point where almost like GSP, you know what's coming, but you can't stop it. And I think Blaydes is going to hit that level. But to go along with his wrestling, he's also got a really good chin. He did survive shots from the two of the hardest hitters in the UFC, which is Hunt in his last fight and Ngannou. Now, Ngannou did stop him, but that was from a cut. So that was a doctor stoppage. And Hunt, in all fairness, he did make him do that stanky leg, and in my opinion, Hunt missed an uppercut, I think, with the left hand at some point in that flurry. And I do think if he'd have hit him with that uppercut, that might have been all she wrote. But instantly, after that uppercut missed, Blaydes I don't know if he saw it miss, but that was, he took that chance to recover. He clinched with Hunt, he took him down, he did recover, and then again, that was all she wrote for the fight. It was just takedown after takedown and won a comfortable decision. So I think that if you're taking punches off Ngannou and you're taking punches off Mark Hunt and you don't get knocked out by either, I think you can pretty much say that, Blaydes has got a solid chin, which is something that is very rarely said in the heavyweight division, because heavyweights knock each other out left, right, and centre. We're only human. Any sort of pressure on the jaw, you're going down, and because the heavyweights hit that hard, you don't normally say, "Oh yeah, he's got a good chin," actually, with a fighter that's been in the heavyweight division. So it is pretty rare that you say that. But I don't think Overeem will be able to offer too much in this fight due to his style. He likes to use a range of kicks. He's also got a really solid clinch game as well. But the problem that Overeem's got here is if he overuses his kicks, then Blaydes eventually will start to catch them, whether it be low to the legs, body, or I don't see Overeem throwing a lot of head kicks, to be honest. But eventually Blaydes will start catching those kicks and get takedowns from him. So it'll almost be a case of Overeem's handing Blaydes what he wants. But I think if he then closes the distance to clinch with Blaydes, I think Blaydes could end up then start, if he gets the whizzer in, he turns him on the cage, he can then start dropping for singles and doubles. And again, Overeem's allowing Blaydes to really flourish in the area that he does. So I honestly think for Overeem, he has to stay at distance and not use kicks, which means that he almost has to make this a boxing match. And do you know what? I absolutely don't mind. I don't mind Blaydes with his boxing at all. I think his striking is improving. He's mentioned that in an interview that I watched. It was before the Mark Hunt fight. He said that his striking's improving. It is something that he's working on, and he's tested himself. And testing himself against someone like Mark Hunt was a brave move. And he hit him with a few decent shots as well. It's not as if he got absolutely slaughtered and then got rocked and then went back to his wrestling. He was having some decent success on the feet, and then he got caught, then he wrestled while he recovered, and then he started striking again a bit, not a lot, but a bit, but still really ballsy for a striker that's improving after just being rocked by Mark Hunt. You then still standing and trading shots with Mark Hunt. I bet Blaydes that fight as well, and every time the takedown came, it was just a sigh of relief because it was just that much sweat watching him strike. But he's improving, and if this does become a boxing fight, because Overeem's not throwing kicks and because he doesn't want to close distance, then I don't mind Blaydes in that position at all, and I think he could beat Overeem boxing. Now, if Overeem starts throwing his kicks and using the tie clinch, and Blaydes isn't capitalising on catching anything and taking him down, then that's going to be a fucking nightmare for Curtis Blaydes. I'm not going to sit here and say Overeem's got no path to victory, because he certainly has. But I think Overeem's path to victory completely depends on Blaydes and what Blaydes does. And for that reason, I really like Curtis Blaydes here. Because if he decides to close the distance at all times, shoot takedowns constantly, whether he's successful or not with them at first, he will be eventually. I know Daniel Omielanchuk stopped all of Blaydes' takedowns, but Blaydes ended up winning that fight just from pressure anyway. So, Overeem winning this fight depends on Curtis Blaydes, and for when you're looking at it from that point of view, you can never trust that fighter that their win depends on what the other guy does. It's not a good spot to start betting a fighter with that path to victory. Honestly, though, I think the takedowns will be there all night for Curtis Blaydes. Again, Overeem might stuff the first one or two, maybe three, but just even if it's stuffing them for the entire round one, and somehow Overeem managed to win that round one, Blaydes will get him down eventually. Like I said, the dude's getting better, much better each fight. And if he was taking Mark Hunt down here, there, and everywhere, I honestly think he'll take Overeem down as well. And when Overeem's on his back, I just don't think he's going to have a lot to offer. He'll probably try to wrap up a guillotine initially when Blaydes is trying to take him down. But I honestly won't, without looking at Overeem's record, I don't even know when the last time it was that he landed that, he pulled that guillotine off. He knocked Miocic down, and instead of finishing him by strikes, which would have won him the UFC heavyweight championship, he decided to then wrap up a guillotine on a very rocked Miocic, and still didn't manage to pull it off. So honestly, I don't see that being a factor in this fight at all. I'm not worried about that. So I just don't think Overeem's going to have much to offer off his back. Can he stand up? I'm not sure, maybe. But if he does stand up, Blaydes will keep a hold of him and just drag him straight back down anyway. And I think Blaydes will just win a unanimous decision victory. I don't think he'll stop Overeem. I think that the fight to go the distance is actually like plus 130, plus 140. Well, it was earlier when I checked. I'm not sure what it is now. I actually see some value in that, because I don't see Overeem, even if it stays standing, I don't see Overeem knocking Blaydes out anyway. So regardless of who wins, I think it's going to go to a decision. So I do see value in the plus money in that. But for me, like I say, minus 117, 3 units on Curtis Blaydes. And the final breakdown, full breakdown of the podcast, the final bet is 3 units again with, excuse me, Mirsad Bektic at minus 175, who's fighting Ricardo Lamas. Now, before the odds came out, I always make notes after I watch tape, and the fighters that are potential bets, I always put a little line next to next to the fighter of sort of where I see value and where I think that I'd be happy taking that fight. It's never completely nailed on like it has to be that or below. Otherwise, I'm not betting it. I will give it a bit of leeway. So Bektic actually lined straight up at -175 as my value. It opened at -175. It went up a little bit to -200. Came back to -175. I hit it then, and then now it's back up to like -230, -240. And I agree exactly where this line is right now, and I just think this is a horrible fight for Lamas. Now, ironically, I think both Bektic and Lamas match up pretty evenly on the feet, but for different reasons. So Lamas has the better shot selection. I think is a slightly more technical striker as well, whereas Bektic is the far better movement in and out of range, and he's better at managing distance and the cage control as well. So I think mixing those two striking styles together could cause a bit of a stalemate on the feet, but I don't expect the fight to stay on the feet for very long anyway. I think that it'll be a grappling heavy fight. And this is where Bektic is really exciting, and this is where you really see the prospect side of him. Excuse me. So Bektic has got near perfect entries on his takedowns. He's got amazing double and single leg takedowns as well. And he tends to land himself in half guard or side control when the fighter's back hits the mat. Now, you typically saw this from GSP back in the day. He would, there was times where he would double leg someone and, land in guard, but he always looked to try and advance that position before the fights even hit the mat. So you can just see with those sort of takedown artists and those grapplers that they are really high level, and the fight IQ on the mat is just unbelievable. And it's ironic that I'm mentioning GSP with Bektic right now because Bektic actually made a move over to TriStar. I'm not totally sure if he is training with GSP, but obviously GSP has a big part to play at TriStar. He was their star coming up, and obviously he's always said, even when he has had the time out of MMA, that he's always still training and keeping in shape. So I would imagine that's the gym of his choice that he goes to. So that's the one that he's had all his life. So it would be very interesting to know if Bektic is definitely working with GSP inside out for this camp. And if he is, it makes me even more confident that he's going to absolutely steamroll Ricardo Lamas in. Now, I don't want to pay too much disrespect to Ricardo Lamas because he is a good fighter. And he's been at the top for, forever, top of the division. He did just get flatlined though by Josh Emmett in his last fight, so that was brutal. It wasn't a life-changing knockout. He didn't take unnecessary beating afterwards. The referee stopped it at the right time, and that was great. But nonetheless, he got absolutely flatlined by Emmett, and I just think that you've got those question marks about his durability right now as well, and I do think Lamas will try and hit takedowns also. I mean, this is what I mean. I think it's going to be a grappler in every fight. I think Lamas will try to engage in clinching up and, like I say, getting the fight to the mat where he's on top, which would be really interesting to see what Bektic is like on the bottom, because it's not a position that he's used to being in. But again, I think you can tell by his top game, and like I said, trying to land in advanced positions on the mat during takedowns. I think when you start looking at his overall ground game, I do think that you can make the assumption that his defensive wrestling is going to be good as well. So yeah, I do think Lamas is going to try and take Bektic down as well, but I don't think he's going to be as successful because it'll be Bektic that's controlling the range of the fight. So I think if Lamas does try and shoot on Bektic, I think Bektic will make sure he's always too far away, which will allow Bektic to sprawl easily. I think when Bektic gets into shooting range, that'll be when he decides to, and that'll be when he decides to shoot, and he'll have success doing so. I think the whole range of this fight is going to be dependent on when Bektic wants to come in. When he wants to come in himself, that'll be when he's the one shooting the takedown. He'll score takedowns. I'm positive he will. His takedown game's incredible, and his grappling's good as well. when he doesn't want to shoot, he's going to be too far away. So this is where I think Lamas is really going to struggle, and it's just a stylistic match. It's almost going to be like a chess match until Bektic starts taking him down. The thing is, I think Bektic will have success taking him down. I think he can score takedowns, and if he can score them at will, which I believe he can, I don't see this fight being very competitive at all. So I've heard some people say, it's going to be a really, really close fight. It'll be a close fight if Bektic can't score takedowns, and I totally agree with that side. But the thing is, I don't see a scenario in this fight where Bektic can't score a takedown as and when he wants to. And with Lamas's durability being a bit questionable now, like I've mentioned before, with that brutal knockout of Josh Emmett, I think Bektic is going to finish the fight via ground and pound TKO, sort of mid to late fight, maybe second or third round. I think that it's going to be a bit of a case with what happened with Darren Elkins, and that's another point to mention as well. I know Bektic lost that fight against Darren Elkins, but man, that was one of the best comebacks in all of MMA history. But what you've got to take away from that fight is forget the finish, forget that Bektic lost that fight. It's what Mirsad Bektic was doing to Darren Elkins for like nearly 3 full rounds. It's insane. Nobody's ever dominated Darren Elkins in that way. Taking Darren Elkins down, laying on top of him. He cut him deep in about 2 or 3 places on his face. Bektic doesn't just sit in position and, lay and pray for a decision on the scorecards. He'll try and put you out. He'll hit you with nasty elbows and just hammer fists, ground and pound, trying to advance position, just ultimately just hurt his opponent at all times. And I think eventually it's going to become too much for Lamas. I think Lamas is going to get beaten up on the bottom. And yeah, I've got Bektic to win the fight via a late TKO. So that's it for the full breakdown. So just a quick roundup. We've got 3 units on Holm at -162. I've got 3 units on Curtis Blaydes at -117. And I've got 3 units on Mirsad Bektic at -175. So into the quickfire round. We've got the main event of the evening, the championship fight. We've got Robert Whittaker against Yoel Romero. And I'm so stoked for this fight. It wasn't actually until a couple of days ago that I actually watched their first fight. I was on holiday last year for it. I sort of have a rule of thumb where if I miss a card because of a holiday or whatever, I won't come back and watch it, the card at a later date. My head's always looking forward, winning, cashing bets, making money. So my eyes are always looking forward. But the other side to this sort of technique that I use when it comes to my method of tape and winning bets is I knew that I would have to watch this fight at some point later down the line, because at some point Whittaker was going to fight again, at some point Romero was going to fight again. So I was always going to watch this fight later down the line, and I have done here. And honestly, it was just like everybody said. Romero clearly round 1 and 2, Whittaker rounds 3, 4, and 5, and that's with Whittaker hitting his knee as well. I think it was mid first round, so he fought pretty much the entire fight with a really damaged knee. And honestly, I see the fight going exactly the same way again. Potentially even a Whittaker finish this time. I honestly cannot see Romero being able to beat Whittaker, because Romero, if he goes hard like he went last time in the first 2 rounds, he'll gas again. He hasn't got 3 rounds of that pace, and that's a real problem against Whittaker. And bear in mind, like I say, Whittaker was hurt, so would Romero have taken both the first 2 rounds if Whittaker wasn't hurt? We don't know. We can't answer that question, but what we do know is Whittaker definitely would have been more competitive in those first 2 rounds against an oncoming Russian Romero trying to put Whittaker out. So that's the problem Romero's going to have. He can't go 3 rounds at that pace. So does Romero pace himself like he did with Luke Rockhold? Now the problem is here, if Romero paces himself earlier in the fight against Whittaker, that's great because his cardio will last a little bit longer. But when he paces himself, he ultimately will have to slow himself down. That's how you pace. If Romero slows himself down, Whittaker will love that because Whittaker will have more time to move in and out himself, more time to land kicks up and down the body, get in with good shots, hit that jab out, hit throw combinations, and really just control the range, control the cage and the distance as well. So I don't see how Romero can approach this fight and win it, and it's almost a bit disrespectful to say that because Romero's a great fighter. You know, he's the number one fighter in, well, aside from the champion, he's the number one fighter in the middleweight division, and he's ranked number one for a reason. But I just think that Whittaker is one of those fighters that it's just almost like his kryptonite, almost like Romero's kryptonite, that he will just struggle to beat him no matter how many times they fight. I think that Whittaker could at least take 3 rounds again from him, maybe even a 4th round, and make it completely, well, not completely dominant, because I'm not saying he'll score all 5 rounds, but make it very dominant. But I actually think he could finish Romero this time. A lot of the power from his punches and especially his kicks as well were just so much lower than normal because of his knee last time, and he almost hurt Romero pretty bad as well. I think it was in round 4 of their last fight. So I'd honestly, I know this is supposed to have been a quick fire round and quick fire pick, but it's the main event. It's a championship fight, is what it is. I think Whittaker is gonna finish Romero this time. I think it'll be 3rd or 4th round. I think if Romero does pace himself and comes out slow, though, it could even be sooner than that. I just think that Romero has to come out the way he came out last time and just hope that he's got something in the tank to score one of the later rounds. I think that's his path to victory. But ultimately, my pick is Robert Whittaker to beat Yoel Romero by knockout. The reason I haven't bet this as well is just because the line's too much for me. I think Whittaker's like minus 225, minus 230, and it's sort of a bit salty as well because I actually got Whittaker. I bet Whittaker to beat Romero in the last fight, and I think I got Whittaker at plus 120 or plus 125. So I actually got plus money on him to win that first fight. So because of that, and now it's minus 225, I just can't. It's too much. It's too much for a price for me. I'll sit back and enjoy this one. Then the next fight in the quick fire round, another very, very interesting fight, one that I've actually been going backwards and forwards on. 2 fighters that I am really, really big fans of, and I don't even mind admitting that when it comes to Colby Covington. He's won me. People say, "Oh, why do you like Colby? He's this and he's that." But listen, the dude's won me so much money over his UFC career. I bet him pretty much every single fight. I've cashed him pretty much every single fight. In fact, the only one I didn't was Damian Maia, just because I wasn't sure. You see Maia submitting everyone. He's a 4th degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I wasn't sure, but I was wrong because I should have been sure. So yeah, really like Colby Covington. He's won me a lot of money. I love that wrestling style. That's a game that I really, really embrace in MMA and really love to watch. And then you've got Rafael dos Anjos again, another fighter that's exciting. He's good on the feet. He's good on the ground. And another fighter that I've won money off, especially since he's moved up to welterweight. I just keep cashing them bets every time someone's saying, "Oh, he's too small," or "He's going to get bullied by this guy." He comes through, and I bet him every single time. And I just can't bet at this fight, though. I think that it is going to be tough for Rafael dos Anjos. You saw Khabib throw him about when they fought down at lightweight. It's going to be a bit of a weird one for Colby Covington this time because this is probably going to be one of the first fights in a very long time where he's going to be the much bigger fighter and the much stronger fighter. Normally, he's the one that's a little undersized at welterweight. And ultimately, I think that power, that strength, and those relentless takedown attempts are going to take its toll on RDA. I think RDA might stuff a couple early on, maybe, but eventually Colby will get those takedowns. He'll get them at will, and remember it's a 5-round fight because it's an interim title fight. So I think Colby eventually is just going to start really wearing on RDA and really, really slowing him down. And the longer the fight, it's going to be a case of the longer the fight goes on with Colby doing what he's doing, the more dominant it's going to look for Colby. The reason I haven't bet this fight, because the lines are close, I think they're about to pick him now, although you can still get Colby at plus money. So you might be thinking, well, why are you not taking plus money on Colby? It's just because I've been backwards and forwards on the fight so much. And the other thing to take into consideration is and I can't seem to get this out of my head. And if I hadn't have seen this from Colby, I honestly would be betting him in a heartbeat here. But it's that first round against Damian Maia just getting tagged by that same left hand over and over again. Not only is Dos Anjos a much better striker than Maia, a much better striker than Colby Covington, he's also a lot more than just a spammed left hand. He's got combinations. He mixes in kicks with his combinations as well. Starts with kicks, ends with kicks. He's got elbows. He can work inside the clinch. We saw that against Robbie Lawler. He's a fucking brilliant striker. Also under Master Rafael Cordero as well. He's just a great striker. I just can't get the thought out of my head of if that was RDA in Maia's shoes in that fight, having that amount of time to strike against Colby. I just can't get that image out of my mind that he wouldn't knock Colby out, because I think he would. Ultimately, I don't think Colby's going to give him the same respect standing as what he did with Maia. I think Colby's not going to allow a lot of time on the feet. I think he is going to get takedowns and early on. I just don't think he's going to mess with RDA on the feet, and for that reason, I think he'll win. But it's just a case of what if, I suppose you can say that with any fight. It's just there is an astronomical difference here in the striking. So if Colby did get a little disrespectful, I think RDA will knock him out. But the official pick is Colby Covington to win by a dominant decision. The next fight in the heavyweight division, we've got Andrei Arlovski versus Tai Tuivasa. Again, I had the opportunity to bet Tai Tuivasa at -162. I think he's like nearly -300 now, so massive difference in the price. I just didn't see a lot of value in him though at -162. I thought the lines would be a lot closer, and I definitely didn't see the lines where they are right now. You've got Arlovski, who's got the glass chin. You've got Tai Tuivasa, who's a young, powerful, explosive striker going into the UFC, knocking Rashad Coulter out with a flying knee, proceeding to finish him via ground and pound. And then he comes out and puts Cyril Asker out there as well. Cyril Asker didn't go out easily either. Tai Tuivasa had to smash him with some unbelievably brutal shots. Cashed money on that fight as well, which was nice. But the problem is, and I watched a lot of tape on Tai Tuivasa when I bet when I bet on the Cyril Asker fight, and I did see that he does tire late in fights. Now, we've seen this with Arlovski lately. Even though he's got this glass chin, suddenly he's got out of fights with Stefan Struve, who's known to knock people out, and even knocked down and TKO'd the current UFC heavyweight champion Stipe Miocic. Then you've got Junior Albini, who was coming back off a brutal knockout of a heavyweight with a good chin in Timothy Big Dick Johnson. And both guys Arlovski's survived with and beaten by decision. So, you're suddenly questioning, well, where's this chin come from? Now, if Arlovski can get out of this first round with Tai Tuivasa, then things get very interesting, because not only has Tai Tuivasa failed to knock him out, which could demoralise him, it's also probably took a heavy hit on the gas tank as well. From there, I think Arlovski might even be able to score takedowns like he did against Struve, and really just grind Tai Tuivasa out and win by decision. That is a very, very strong possibility that happens. It's not as if like we're thinking, oh yeah, but that's a big if and it probably won't happen, or it can't happen. That's a very good possibility. That's a good possibility of happening. However, from a pick point of view, I don't think Arlovski does come out of that first round. I do think Tai Tuivasa puts it on him, and I do think that glass chin gets checked once again. So my official pick is Tai Tuivasa to win by round 1 knockout. Then in the next fight, we've got CM Punk against Mike Jackson. I don't really know how much to say about this fight, because it's just, in my opinion, it's an absolute joke. And the reason I say it's a joke, I get why they're doing it for the pay-per-view polls and stuff like that, but I personally know a lot of professional MMA fighters. I know the shit they go through. I know how hard they work to get the records to a place where they are going to be starting to be attracted by bigger promotions such as the UFC. The UFC don't normally take people on bad records, so if you do start bad in your MMA career, you're really on an uphill battle to really rescue your record, start looking good, and then start attracting the big names. So I do I do completely get the blood, the sweat, and the tears that goes into a professional MMA career and what those fighters put themselves through to get to the top. And then you get fighters like this. It's on the pay-per-view of a huge UFC card. They're both 0-1. So the running joke is someone's O has to go. Now, normally that's said when both fighters are unbeaten and someone has to be beaten, but for this case, someone has to win. It is a running joke, and I just don't agree with it at all. For that reason, who knows who's going to win this fight? I've got absolutely no idea. They both fought once. They both lost once. They both lost to the same guy, Mickey Gall. They both lost to the same method of victory via submission. They both lost to the same submission, which was the rear naked choke. They both lost in round one and looked absolutely awful. Who knows? I mean, I'm gonna pick CM Punk by God knows what, potentially a decision maybe, but that's only because I think he's the bigger name and he's probably going to have had the better camp and the better support through the camp. So I'll pick CM Punk, but absolutely no idea. Wouldn't recommend betting it. I know CM Punk's a 2-1 dog. I know some people are seeing value in that, but I don't see value in any fighter that's 0-1 fighting against another fighter that's 0-1 that has not been fight. I've said enough about it. Moving on. So we've got Claudia Gadelha against Carla Esparza. Interesting fight. Two strong wrestlers. I just think Claudia Gadelha is just a better fighter right now. I think Carla Esparza is still a good wrestler. I do think she can pose problems, but the thing is here, I think Gadelha could win on the feet as well as the mat, whereas I don't think Esparza can win on the feet. She can only win on the mat, and I'm not sure she has too much success in her wrestling. So I'll be picking Claudia Gadelha to win by a unanimous decision. Next, we've got Rashad Coulter against the short notice opponent Chris De La Rocha. This fight again is probably going to end in round one, like I mentioned with the other heavyweight fight with Arlovski and Tuivasa. I think Rashad Coulter's going to knock him out in round one. I don't think De La Rocha's striking defense is that great. I think he allows himself to get hit a little too much. And although Coulter's not the most prolific striker, he does have a boxing background. I think this will be the fight where he finally gets that win in the UFC after being knocked out by Jay Sherman and Tai Tuivasa. And I think Rashad Coulter gets the knockout in round one. So next we've got the second Rashad. We've got Rashad Evans versus Anthony Smith. I honestly think Rashad Evans is massively on the decline. I don't think he's going to be able to stay in this fight very long with Anthony Smith unless he tries to use his wrestling. We've seen that Anthony Smith is a little bit susceptible to the wrestling game. Andrew Sanchez took him down a few times, but Andrew Sanchez also had to work for those takedowns as well. And although he's not a great overall fighter, Sanchez, he is a very good wrestler. So I do think that Smith might maybe get taken down a couple of times in the first round, but eventually I think once Smith starts to crack, I think if he hits Rashad Evans with some of the shots here, Maheta Santos with, Evans is not staying upright and conscious with those shots being hit on him. So I'll go round 2 knockout for Anthony Smith. And next we've got the third fight on the evening, and it's crazy. We've got Joe Benevidez against Sergio Pettis. A really interesting fight, but also a really easy one to sort of break down in what's going to happen. I think if Joe Benevidez comes out here and with a wrestling heavy game plan, I think we see exactly what we saw in the Cejudo and Pettis fight, with Pettis just getting taken down repetitively and not really having any answer for it. But I think if Benevidez, I don't think Benevidez is that much of a relentless wrestler as what Cejudo is, nor is he as good as a wrestler as Cejudo. So I do think Pettis might have some success in stuffing takedowns if they do come, and then on the feet, I think Pettis is just the more decorated striker for sure. And for that reason, I'm going to pick Pettis to win. I'm not going to bet it because just in case he does get wrestle fucked, I don't want to bet on a fighter that's getting wrestle fucked. It's the worst feeling in the world. I've bet three fighters in the past against wrestlers, and they all lost by getting wrestle fucked, and it's just horrible to watch. They're stupid bets to play, and like I say, when you're watching your money just going down, just slowly dripping down the drain from someone that's just getting late, that's someone that's laying on your guy. It's horrible to see. So I am going to go Pettis by a unanimous decision. Could potentially be split if it's close and Benevidez does stay striking, because he's got decent striking as well. But yeah, Pettis is my official pick. Next, we've got Clay Guida against short notice fighter Charles Oliveira. Bit upset that Bobby Green pulled out because I was massively high on Clay Guida in that fight, and I would have definitely put the bet on Clay Guida, obviously line depending. But now he's replaced by Charles Oliveira, and ultimately I think that Charles Oliveira could win this fight, and is rightfully the favourite as well. Guida's shown that he's susceptible to just being submitted. He's been submitted a lot of times. I think it's something like maybe 9 times, or 5 times out of 9, or something like that. He's been submitted a lot anyway in his MMA career. And Charles Oliveira is a really strong grappler with a strong submission game as well. So I think at first Clay Guida might just be, bopping around in and out. And I think Oliveira might have to take a little bit of time to work him out and find out when the right time is to probably clinch up and trip him to the mat. But ultimately, I think that's what happens. I think Oliveira does tie up. I think he does get the trip takedowns, and I think he will submit Clay Guida probably mid to late fight. Last fight, and the last quick fire round, we've got Mike Santiago against Dan Ige. Not watched tape on it, not got a huge read on it. I'm picking Mike Santiago. Dan Ige, he's more of a wrestling style fighter, but his takedowns don't seem to be that strong. He struggled to take Julio Arce down in their last fight, and he was trying time and time again to get Arce down. Whereas Santiago's just come off a fight with Mads Bennell, who's a great takedown artist. I mentioned him in the Liverpool podcast. Really disappointed that didn't cash, but I won't go into that too much. But Mike Santiago was stuffing a few takedowns from Mads. He actually scored a couple himself as well. I think Mads is head and shoulders above Dan Ige in regards to A, his overall game, and B, his wrestling game for sure. And his grappling as well. So I just think Mike Santiago had some success against Mads Bennell. I think he'd be able to have more success against a fighter like Dan Ige. So my pick is Mike Santiago to win by decision. And that's all she wrote. So just a quick message before I go. If you're listening to this podcast on the Newsome MMA YouTube channel, it's also available on the Newsome MMA website too, along with so much additional content surrounding all aspects of MMA. It really does have something for everybody on that website, from betting advice to prediction videos and podcasts to specific content coming from heavy duty fight management too. Also, please check out my sponsors of the Newsome MMA podcast, which is CBD Life at UK. You can access the offers from my sponsorship by clicking any of the banners on the Newsome MMA website, and you can also get 15% off your first order by using promo code Newsome MMA. So don't miss out on that offer. And that's it, guys. Again, if you're on YouTube, please like, subscribe. The channel's still developing really slowly. I'd really like to get those numbers up. And we'll see you back in a couple of weeks. We've got a week break, so we'll see you back for UFC Singapore.